Title of this message is The Creation of HaTalmud Ephrati, the Ephraimite Talmud. And in this message we will cover things, the purposes of the creation of Ephraimite Talmud, exactly what is its nature, what is it, its purpose, a few disclaimers, and for what reasons, why, and who could be worthy of its compilation, and how it would be compiled, and these types of things. But regarding a little bit of introduction, there are many problems within Messiah's body today. We remain divided in discord. Many elements and points of our walk are, we don't see eye to eye, we're not on the same page. And so there's several gaps in our worship. The Hebrew roots movement, the Messianic, on either side, there's a lot of division, and we're not unified. We're not united. Messiah's body is broken. It's not fully healed and together. So, a solution I'm proposing to you, one of many that will have to be implemented, in order to effectuate this union of Messiah's body, this greater overarching union of Messiah's body, is that we need, it would be good that we have, an authoritative body offense law to help govern and steer the peoples of Elohim, peoples of God. For this reason, we propose the creation of HaTalmud Ephrati, Ephraimite Talmud. And so it would entail many different kinds of categories of offense law pertaining to virtually every kind of aspect of life. We also know that there are potential problems that we had in its creation, and so we are setting it up. We are building it with these problems in mind, so that when it's structured, when it's built, that we don't follow the same pitfalls as the Pharisees. So, what do we do then, so we don't repeat the same mistakes as the Pharisees, or at least the Pharisees that Yeshua came against? We remedy them. We just simply don't fall into the same errors and traps the Pharisees made. Nevertheless, we can and should still create HaTalmud Ephrati. So purposes. Number one, what are the purposes of HaTalmud Ephrati, the Ephraimite Talmud? First of all, what is Ephraimite and what is Talmud? So the Talmud, many people know, at least from Judaism, Pharisaic Judaism, Rabbinical Judaism. Pharisaic Judaism has evolved into Rabbinical. It's pretty much the same thing, only different slants, more evolved slants. But the Talmud, there's two kinds of Talmudim in Judaism. There's the Palestinian Talmud, or the Talmud Yerushalmi, and then there's the Babylonian Talmud, Talmud Bavli. Very similar, few subtle differences. And it's composed primarily of the Mishnah and the Gemara. The Gemara is a 4th century text written by a lot of Rabbim discourses, and that's based off of the Mishnah, or that came from the Mishnah, sort of, which was composed between 100 BCE to 150 CE, roughly into there. Also, a discourse of rabbis and their discussions on the halakot of the Torah. So it's a commentary off of a commentary, and these two commentaries have kind of fused together to create the Talmud. And so there's many problems with the Talmud, especially the Gemara, which I believe is a 4th century text that is full of demons. And even though there's many good things in it, there's many bad things in it. And so we want to do it right with the creation of the Ephraimite Talmud. Plus, many of the halakot in the Talmud is not correct. It's very skewed. It's wrong. So we want to bring more correct halakha, that is application of law, the way one walks, halakha, in accordance with proper Torah understanding, filtered through the lens of our Messiah, Yeshua of Nazareth, and the Brit Hadashah, and the apostles, and Haruach Elohim, the Spirit of God. So, purpose number one, let me explain Ephraimite. So, the reason why I say Ephraimite is because largely I believe this whole Messianic movement is kind of had this awakening of the lost tribes of Israel, largely had by the tribe of Ephraim in these last days, who will pioneer the second Exodus for the return of all the sons of Jacob. And Ephraim is the northern kingdom of Israel. He was the chief ruler, the chief leading tribe in the northern kingdom of Israel. Judah was the chief one in the south, and Ephraim was the one in the north. And so I believe, eschatologically speaking, I believe Ephraim is the one to sort of be the harbinger for this end time launch into the kingdom. And so that's hence the term Ephraimite Talmud, HaTalmud Ephrati. So I guess the first purpose, number one, purpose of the Ephraimite Talmud, to be a tool to aid in the union of Ephraim and all the tribes of Israel, in order to get on the same page for greater order in regards to their worship, dress, diet, finances, social interaction, and their everyday walk. Number two, to be a tool to assist in launching the peoples of Elohim into the kingdom ages by accustoming them to higher kingdom principles and soul boundaries, for there is freedom in law. A lot of people in the world thinks that there's bondage in law. Even a lot of Messianics think there's bondage in law. When the reason why we have freedom, at least in America and every country, there's a measure of freedom is because there's law. If there wasn't law, there'd be anarchy, chaos, which is chaos. So there is freedom in law. And so this is taking it from physical boundaries to elevating it to soul boundaries. We see that the purpose of the Bible is that we can, it's a form of soul boundary. We can have rulings for our souls, so that our souls don't become anarchic and hence chaotic, so that we destroy ourselves. Point number three, to serve as a body of halakha, that is the way to walk, of direct law and fence law. Direct law is that which is clearly written in the scriptures. Fence law are rulings that are either implied or somehow extrapolated from the scriptures and are given by men to men. This work then, the Ephraimite Talmud, is a record of halakha, a halakot, not of Haggadah, Haggadah being story or legend, but of halakha, law. That is an exhaustive compendium of practical wisdom and application of the commandments of Yahuwah and the standards of the kingdom of heaven morality. Now I need to take a little excursus here. So will it solely be a body of law? It would also include other elements such as doctrine. So actually, one certain kind of doctrine, once doctrine is formulated, we might then graduate certain elements of that doctrine into law. Or else, for the direct laws or fence laws to make sense and to build their case, we might first need to establish elements of doctrine. Or else preface certain laws with a measure of preparatory understanding, whether it be Haggadic, doctrinal, or eschatological in nature. So yes, the Ephraimite Talmud should include more than just direct law and fence law. Point number 4. Its purpose is also to serve as a kind of penultimate go-to textual guide containing answers, rulings, maxims, and idealisms which pertain to nearly every facet of life, from some of the most complex and difficult situations down to some of the most simplistic and easiest situations of life. Point number 5. to serve as a framework for tradition. So as a kind of a parabolic analogy would be that it would be like a lattice, whereby the fruitful grapevines could spread out and have solid lattice work to be able to adhere to, thence receive more sunlight and moisture, thus becoming more fruitful, fruit-bearing, or have the capacity to be more fruit-bearing. So moving on to disclaimers. So in order to avoid some of these pitfalls, to not repeat some of the same mistakes as others have repeated in their seeking to make offense for the Torah, to try and guard the Torah, we have to set up several disclaimers prior to the creation of the Talmud and prefacing its source guide. So, disclaimer number 1. The contents within the Ephraimite Talmud do not replace nor usurp the voice of Yahuwah. One must consult the personal voice of Yahuwah before consulting the Ephrati Talmud. So each of us have our own quest, our own personal relationship with our Heavenly Father. This must come first before consulting the Ephraimite Talmud. Definitely before consulting Google or any other thing, minus the word of Yahuwah. The voice of Yah comes before the consultation of this book, before this text. Number 2, disclaimer number 2. The contents within the Ephraimite Talmud do not replace nor usurp the written word of Yahuwah, neither are they on the same level as the written word of Yahuwah. They are beneath it and therefore must be subject to it. So even though they seek to these laws, these halakot, these rulings within the Ephraimite Talmud, seek to interpret the laws of the Bible, it does not trump nor usurp the laws of the Bible. So the Ephraimite Talmud is subject to biblical law. Even though it seeks to understand biblical law and tries to interpret it, it's still subject to it. Number 3, one of the goals of the creation of the beginning creation is for the laws of the Spirit of Yahuwah and the Torah to be instinctual. Since the beginning, this is one of the very purposes of our creation, is for the Yah's divine nature be instinctual within our hearts, written upon our hearts. See Deuteronomy 30:14, Ezekiel 36:26-27. And that the citizens of the kingdom of heaven do the deeds of righteousness naturally. One must be careful not to let the rulings contained within the Ephraimite Talmud become so rigid in one's life that they constrict or stifle the flow of the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. There must be a proper perspective of or healthy balance between heeding man's rulings, no matter how great or wise. There must be a healthy balance between heeding man's rulings and being led individually and directly by the Spirit of Yahuwah. Number 4. As often as possible, the Ephraimite Talmud must reference and direct one back to the primary sources. That is, the written word of Yahuwah and the voice of Yahuwah. Disclaimer number 5. The fence laws contained within the Ephraimite Talmud must be distinguished from the written word of Yahuwah. They are rulings by men giving to men in the creation. So one of the pitfalls of the Pharisees during Yeshua's day was that they didn't distinguish their own rulings and their takanot, certain of their high-level traditions. They didn't distinguish that from Torah law. Therefore, they taught it as if you were to break their ruling, it would be sin unto you. It would be violating Yah's commandments. It would be transgression against Elohim's commandments. This is one of their fallacies. So we don't want to make that distinction. So the rulings given, the interpretive rulings, that is fence law rulings, given in the Ephraimite Talmud, must be distinguished, that these are rulings that we have made, that wise men have made, yes, even by the Spirit of Elohim, that have been given by men to men. So we distinguish these from the scriptural command itself. We isolate the scriptural command and so clearly distinguish the scriptural command from the fence law. So there's no blur. There's a clear line in the sand as to scriptural law and fence law. Disclaimer number 6. The contents contained within the Ephraimite Talmud, once set forth, cannot be abrogated for any reason. Once codified, it is as if they are written in stone to exist forever and ever. However, the Ephraimite Talmud is not a closed book. The contents may be built upon. This is this ruling, or this disclaimer number 6. There would be a few exceptions to this ruling regarding the non-abrogation, the unalienable alterations. There may be a few exceptions to this. Also, the Ephraimite Talmud not being a closed book, of course, once it's codified, it can only be added to under certain jurisdiction and proper halakhic experts and proper governance, watching over any other additional rulings added to the source text or the Ephrati Talmud. Disclaimer number 7. Depending on the circumstance, for no two circumstances are the same, certain rulings contained within the Ephrati Talmud might momentarily be suspended or curbed, bypassed, in order to directly preserve a life or to permit healing. So this is one thing that Yeshua came against the Pharisees with in the first century, was they made their rulings unalterable, even at the cost of life or the detriment of life. So they didn't want to break them, even if life was at stake or if someone was to be healed. So certain sects of Pharisees, most sects of Pharisees, Ron Mosley actually suggests that there were certain sects of Pharisees that did permit healing on the Sabbath, but most sects during the first century did not permit healing on the Sabbath. And so that's one of the things that Yeshua came against them for. So we definitely want to permit healing on the Sabbath and not stifle the flow of the Ruach HaKodesh, what the Spirit of Elohim wants to do for His creation. Number 8. To what extent a fence law is binding is dependent upon its caliber of height or weightiness, wherein each fence law is different, and therefore the fence laws differ in their height, that is, their severity or weightiness. Thus we assign a number, from a scale of 1 to 10, a designated caliber of height to each fence law. Some fence laws set forth will be binding for all of Israel, with a death penalty attached if broken, and others not binding with any consequences attached, so no consequences if they're broke. And I'll give examples of each later. And disclaimer number 9. Any collaborator who contributes to the written wisdom contained within the Ephraimite Talmud must adhere to the disclaimers and rules for fence law legislation. Discuss that a little about that later. So, rules for fence law legislation. Number 1, it is a good thing to make a good fence. In Pirkei Avot, Ethics of Our Fathers, in the Mishnah, chapter 1, verse 1, they say, quote, they, the men of the Great Assembly, would always say these three things: be careful in judgment, establish many disciples, and make a safety fence around the Torah. So, be careful in judgment, establish many disciples, and make a safety fence around the Torah. I endorse this, absolutely, 100%. I believe we should be doing these three things. And so the last one they say is make a safety fence around the Torah. So I agree with them. We need fences around the Torah. Written, codified fences around the Torah. Number 2, rules for fence law legislation. The fence law must not be contrary to or violate any scriptural injunction. Number 3, the fence law must be distinguishable and identifiable as a separate thing apart from the thing or command for which it is guarding. So example, there's to be clearly distinguished between Yah's commandment of Elohim, and a commandment given by men to other men. So you can see disclaimer number 5 as previously discussed. Rule for legislation number 4. The fence must accord with one of the laws of elucidation. That is, Rav Ishmael's 13 rules of elucidation, and there's also additional rules of elucidation not covered by Rav Ishmael that the Father has for his people. Also the rabbinic pardes, that is Peshat, Remez, Drosh, and Sod method of exegesis. Rule for legislation number 5. The fence law must be bearable for all the children of Israel in their stage of life and in their stage of conversion, that is citizenship training. Baby steps if necessary. Nevertheless, progress must be made. Graduate from one stage up through higher stages. So it must be bearable for all B'nai Israel. It can't be too overbearing that all of Israel not be able to keep it. Number 6, the fence law must be applicable as if its roots were in a primitive desert setting, for such was the case of the children of Israel in the wilderness when they received the Torah. In other words, a primitive fence cannot deviate too far into left field. The fence cannot venture too far from level ground. An example, in rabbinical Judaism, they decree that when food is staying warm in the stove during Sabbath, the stove must remain the same temperature throughout Shabbat. Such ruling simply was not practical during the primitive desert wilderness setting, as their campfires were constantly fluctuating in temperature. Therefore, the fence law addressing this matter cannot be binding in our modern day, and which would have been impractical for the wilderness journey Israelites to perform. Nevertheless, it could be given as an ideal ruling. So there are, within the Ephraimite Talmud, there will also be categories of ideal down to least ideal. This is also not to say, however, that a fence law cannot be developed and elucidated and additional fences be further developed from other fences. As, for example, technology. As technology progresses, as it evolves, we are going to need highly developed boundary fences in this area. An example would be robotics. To what extent can a human have robotics take on robotic attachments? To what extent should he not become a cyborg? We would need fence laws in this area. Number 7, there are higher caliber and lesser caliber fences. There should be a scale in grades 1 through 10 on how high, that is, the highness of a fence is its level of severity or weightiness, or low. The lowness level of a fence is how easy or light the fence would be. The yoke is. So high would be how weighty the yoke is. Low would be how easy or light the yoke is. the fence yoke. You can also see disclaimer number 8, as previously discussed. I'm going to quote Exodus 21, 28 through 29. This is to establish an example of a high caliber and low caliber fence, or a high caliber fence. Exodus 21, 28 through 29. If an ox gore a man or woman, that they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and his flesh shall not be eaten, but the owner of the ox shall be quit. But if the ox were wont to push with his horn in times past, and it hath been testified to his owner, and he hath not kept him in, but that he hath killed a man or woman, the ox killed a man or woman, the ox shall be stoned, and his owner shall be put to death. Also be put to death. So an example of a high caliber fence, or that the ox gores his neighbor to death, the fence being any animal who gores his neighbor to death in this instance. And his owner has been previously warned. So that would be a high caliber fence, and it applies not just for ox, but could apply for a dog or for another animal. In the instance of one breaking a high caliber fence, the transgressor would be due a penalty. It would be due a punishment by death for breaking it. So that's an example of high level 10 caliber fence, which would be death penalty. Example of low caliber fence. So the Torah says in Deuteronomy 6:8 to bind that as a sign upon your arm, totafot, upon your arm, otot, upon your arm. In rabbinical Judaism, their fence is that this is the left arm. So in the instance of one breaking a low caliber fence, the transgressor incurs no punishment. The fence may be reduced to a mere tradition. So what determines how high or low a fence is would be the degree of punishment dealt for breaking it. So binding the phylactery or the tefillin on your right arm versus the left arm does not incur punishment. It's not a transgression if one were to break it. It's just simply a suggested ruling we do to get us on the same page, but not a punishment. No punishment ensues if you break it. So, number 5, fence law legislation. So, number 8, for fence law legislation, the fence law must always be leaning toward the side of mercy and compassion. And number 9, ruling for fence law legislation, any kind of material whatsoever outside of the written biblical record that is brought into the Ephraimite Talmud by way of being quoted, summarized, alluded to, or referenced, must first be stripped of any and all demonic ties, influences, and connections, and must be washed in the blood of the Lamb, prayerfully washed in the blood of the Lamb, and must be filtered through the lens of the Torah of Moshe, the prophets of Israel, and the words of our Master and of his apostles. So lastly, contribution. Who is qualified to contribute to this project? What should we consult for sources to bring into the project? And who should we consult to chime in, to contribute? Whatever glimmer of light, no matter how bright or dim, whether it be from an individual, young or old, or from a piece of writing, new or ancient, that may strengthen the glory of Yeshua of Nazareth, that may uphold the Torah of Moshe, and that may benefit the body of Messiah, as long as it adheres to the above regulations, it stands to reason that it could qualify to be absorbed into the Ephraimite Talmud. Additionally, this is a matter of prayer. It is a matter of being a team effort. Ultimately, competent halakhic experts should have the final word with regard to whether a specific situation is permissible or prohibited, that being codified within the Talmud. And these halakhic authorities should be ones who uphold the standard of Torah with sternness and strictness in their own life, and who seek to obey all of our Heavenly Father's commandments. So they must also have a track record of being very strict and stern and scrupulous regarding all the commandments of the Torah. And there does need to be a healthy submission to the order of authority within the body of Messiah. And I see there's many problems. One being unruliness. A lot of people, they have no elders. There is no greater accountability. People are very unruly. They're like an untamed bull in a china cabinet. Just very destructive, and all kinds of just heresies that they're promulgating, and there's lack of order. So there should be a respect and healthy submission to the government that Elohim establishes for the kingdom of heaven, which I believe the Ephraimite Talmud would help the government, the leading elders of Ephraim, to be able to come in agreement with. And many of the laws contained within the Ephraimite Talmud should, however, be binding for all of Israel, yet at the same time not subverting what the voice of Yahuwah is teaching and doing in each person's life. To many, this Ephraimite Talmud might seem like a kind of extraneous pharisaical form of dictatorship, but it's not so, as its main purpose is to serve as a second-hand reference guide, not first-hand but second-hand, first being the word of Elohim, and also is to help Elohim's people, not to control them or bind them or constrict them. It's to help them. Having said all this, if you're interested in this project, I just encourage you to, you can contact me via Facebook, or you can comment on the video below. So tell me what you think. God bless you all. In the name of Yeshua. Shalom.